The polished brass clock in the lobby of Helix Dynamics read exactly 8:47 a.m. when two security guards gripped Daniel Reyes by the elbows and started walking him toward the revolving doors. His faded canvas jacket looked cheap under the marble lights. The VP of Operations, Marcus Hale, stepped forward in a crisp Brioni suit, the Patek Philippe on his wrist catching the overhead spots like a blade. Hale's voice cracked across the morning rush. "Get this nobody out of my building. You're finished here." Daniel's boots scraped the tile once, then again, as they pushed him through the turnstile. A woman in marketing clutched her coffee tighter. A junior engineer looked away. The door spun shut behind him with a soft pneumatic sigh. What no one in that gleaming lobby understood was that the man they had just thrown into the street was the only reason the entire company still existed. And the question that would keep this building awake for weeks was simple. What was buried in those old patents no one had read in 15 years? Daniel Reyes was 34, a single father raising 6-year-old Lily in a cramped walk-up at 14th and Pine. The apartment smelled of instant coffee and the lavender soap his late wife once loved. After her 2-year fight with cancer ended, he had walked away from a 6-figure engineering career so he could be home for Lily. Odd repair jobs paid the rent, but nothing came close to the health benefits he needed. Lily's upcoming heart surgery carried a price tag of $94,200. One stable paycheck with insurance would have changed everything. That morning's humiliation had been his only shot. He stood on the sidewalk until the November wind cut through his jacket, then walked the 12 blocks home without speaking. The blue ribbon from Lily's first hospital bracelet stayed balled in his pocket the whole way, a small square of faded cloth he had carried since the day she was born. That night the building felt different. The usual hum of servers behind the walls had taken on a jagged edge. At 11:19 p.m. the night shift team was already sweating. A critical server rack on sublevel 2 was climbing toward 106 degrees. Cooling alarms had been ignored for 43 minutes. If the temperature hit 112, the whole grid would cascade into blackout. The on-site engineer had already run every diagnostic in the manual. Nothing worked. Daniel still had his old key card from a morning. Someone in security had forgotten to deactivate it in the rush. He slipped into the service stairwell at 11:47, hood up, face down. The corridor smelled of warm electronics and burnt dust. He moved like someone who had done this before, in places far darker than a corporate basement. He found the rack. One glance told him the thermal paste on the primary heat exchanger had migrated and failed. A 20-second fix if you knew which 3 screws to pull. The night crew was shouting on the far side of the glass wall, radios crackling. Daniel worked in silence. He replaced the paste from a small tube he kept in his jacket, reseated the exchanger, and watched the temperature graph drop in clean green lines. Before he left, he keyed the maintenance radio once, voice low and calm. Falcon 9 actual. Thermal excursion resolved. You're clear for stable ops. The radio popped. A confused voice answered. Who the hell is this? Daniel was already gone. The door clicked shut behind him at 12:03 a.m. No one saw his face. The building lights stayed on. The servers cooled. The night crew would spend the rest of their shift wondering who Falcon 9 Actual was and why the problem had simply disappeared. Day 1 was over. Daniel rode the empty bus back to 14th and Pine with grease still on his knuckles. Lily was asleep under the blanket that always carried a faint trace of motor oil from the garage. He sat at the tiny kitchen table until 2:14 a.m., staring at the faded blue ribbon he had placed under the lamp. The storage unit key from Route 17 lay beside it. He had kept every notebook, every blueprint, every rejected patent application from 2009. 15 years of quiet work no one had bothered to read after the company bought the rights for pennies and moved on. The core algorithm that still quietly ran every drone guidance system Helix sold had his name on the original filings. They had simply never credited him. Tomorrow he would start pulling those boxes. Day 2 began at dawn with the metallic groan of the storage unit roll-up door. Inside, Dust floated in the beam of his flashlight like slow gray snow. He found the first banker's box marked Reyes Core IP, Do Not Discard. The corners were soft with age. He carried it to the truck without opening it yet. The weight felt like evidence. By noon, he was back in the garage, Lily coloring quietly on an old blanket spread across the concrete. She had drawn a stick-figure daddy holding a tiny wrench. The smell of hot solder soon mixed with the crayons. Daniel cross-referenced the 2009 schematics against the current Helix firmware logs he had quietly downloaded the night before. The match was exact. Every improvement the company had made in the last decade was built on stolen foundations. The phone rang at 3:17 p.m. An anonymous number. A clipped voice said only, "The sealed bid auction for the original IP portfolio is scheduled in 19 days. Minimum 200,000. You still in?" Daniel looked at Lily, then at the blue ribbon now lying across the open notebook. "I'm in." He hung up and went back to work. Day 3. The garage light stayed on until 4:02 a.m. Daniel rebuilt the original prototype circuit board from memory and spare parts. His hands moved with the same precision they once used on classified drone hardware. The small silver Falcon 9 patch he used to wear on his flight suit was now pinned inside his jacket, hidden against his heart. Every time he reached for a tool, the blue ribbon brushed his fingers, a quiet reminder of why he could not afford to be wrong. The prototype flickered to life at 4:29 a.m. A clean signal.
No la tenki.
The same ghost in the machine that still powered half the contracts Helix held. He powered it down before the hum could wake Lily. She stirred under the blanket anyway, small voice sleepy. "Daddy, is the dark going away soon?" He tucked the ribbon back into his pocket. "Yeah, baby.
Soon."
Day 4. 19 hours until the first backroom meeting with a potential silent partner. Daniel spent the morning on anonymous calls from a burner phone, voice steady, identity buried. Each conversation ended the same way. The original inventor is ready to prove ownership. Cash only. No names until the wire clears. By evening, the bids were climbing. One investor offered $178,000 in a sealed envelope left at a coffee shop on 9th. Daniel counted the bills under the garage lamp while Lily practiced writing her name on scrap paper. The blue ribbon lay across the stack like a bookmark. The numbers were still short. The surgery clock kept ticking. Day 5. The storage unit again. More boxes. More coffee gone cold. Daniel found the original rejection letter from the patent office dated July 14, 2009. The signature at the bottom was his own, younger, hopeful. He folded it once and slid it into the same pocket as the ribbon. The paper felt like armor now. That night, the garage smelled of flux and determination. The prototype passed its third stress test at 2:14 a.m. exactly. Lily had fallen asleep on the old couch he dragged in weeks ago, one small hand clutching the corner of the oil-scented blanket. Daniel stood over her for a long minute, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing. The blue ribbon had slipped from his pocket and landed on her sleeve. He left it there. 16 days until the auction. The debt was being collected one quiet hour at a time. And the building that had thrown him out still had no idea the man they called nobody was slowly turning their lights back on. The phone rang at 3:07 a.m. on what should have been day 6. Daniel snatched it before the second tone. The voice on the other end was clipped professional, the kind that wore Brioni suits to breakfast meetings. "We traced the burner. Interesting pattern. You're either brilliant or desperate. Meet me at the loading dock behind the old Helix warehouse. Midnight. Bring proof. Come alone." Daniel hung up without answering. He stared at the cracked screen until the battery icon blinked red. The blue ribbon rested beside the phone like a warning. He slipped it back into his shirt pocket, right over the scar from the shrapnel that had ended his old life. 12 hours until the meeting. The garage felt smaller, the air thicker with solder and fear. Daniel rebuilt the prototype casing with his bare hands, filing metal until his fingertips bled. Lily sat cross-legged on the concrete, coloring a picture of a rocket with broken crayons. Every few minutes, she glanced at him, small voice soft. "Is the dark still winning, Daddy?" He wiped his hands on a rag that smelled of machine oil and kissed the top of her head. "Not for long, baby." At 11:42 p.m., he parked 2 blocks away, engine off, watching the rear view. The warehouse loomed under sickly sodium lights, the same building that had once paid him in silence and severance. He carried only a battered laptop and the folded rejection letter. The ribbon stayed in his pocket, a thread connecting every wrong turn. The man waiting wore a charcoal overcoat that cost more than Daniel's truck. Polished Italian shoes clicked against wet asphalt. Daniel recognized the face from old company photos. Marcus Hale, head of acquisitions, the same voice that had signed off on his termination 6 years earlier. "You're the ghost," Marcus said, breath fogging in the cold. His Patek Philippe caught the light at 11:58 p.m. exactly. "Prove it." Daniel opened the laptop on the hood of a forgotten forklift. The prototype schematic load. One keystroke and the signal bloomed across the screen, clean, unmistakable. The same waveform that still routed 73% of Helix's encrypted traffic. Marcus's eyes narrowed. For the first time, the polished voice faltered. "Where did you get this?" "I built it," Daniel said quietly, "before you ever wore that watch." Marcus laughed once, short and sharp, but the sound died against the concrete. "The board thinks the original engineer died in a car accident in 2018. Nice story. Clean payout." Daniel closed the laptop. The rejection letter came out next, unfolded under the security lamp. Marcus read the date, the signature, the cold rejection stamp. His jaw tightened. 18 hours until the backroom bids close, Daniel said.
Cash. No lawyers.
Or I walk into the main auction with every patent and watch the whole company burn in public. Marcus stared at him for a long beat. Then he reached into his coat and produced a thick envelope. $212,000. Crisp bills still smelling of fresh ink. That's half. The rest after you sign a non-disclosure that buries this forever. Daniel took the envelope. The blue ribbon brushed his fingers as he tucked the money inside his jacket. He left Marcus standing in the dark, shoes suddenly less shiny against the oil-slicked dock. The money bought 3 more weeks on Lily's surgery schedule. The pediatric cardiologist's office smelled of antiseptic and weak coffee when Daniel slid the cashier's check across the counter at 9:14 a.m. The nurse's hands trembled as she stamped the receipt. Lily's name was now on the calendar in ink. March 11th, 7 a.m., Operating Theater 3. But the prototype needed shielding. The signal was leaking, and that meant Helix's security team was already sniffing the airwaves. Daniel spent the afternoon in the storage unit again, pulling apart an old Faraday cage he had salvaged from a scrapped military drone. The blue ribbon lay across the workbench like a ruler, measuring every cut. By 4:37 p.m., the new casing was sealed. He ran the test in the back of the unit, door half closed against the wind. The signal held. 0 leakage. The ghost in the machine stayed hidden for now. That night, the mini-crisis arrived in the form of a plain white envelope slipped under the garage door at 1:22 a.m.
No stamp.
No return address. Inside was a single Polaroid of Lily playing in the park 2 days earlier. On the back, in neat block letters, "We know who you are. Stop now." Daniel's hands shook so hard the photo fluttered to the concrete. The blue ribbon slipped from his pocket and landed directly on the little girl's face in the picture. He stared at it for a long minute, the smell of developing chemicals still rising off the print. Daniel did not call the police. Instead, he doubled the encryption, rerouted the IP through 3 dead servers in Estonia, and bought a second burner. The prototype passed its 5th stress test at 3:51 a.m. Lily slept through it this time, curled under the oil-scented blanket, one finger hooked through the blue ribbon he had gently returned to her wrist like a bracelet. Marcus Hale's number appeared on the new phone at 6:08 a.m. The voice was no longer polished. It carried the raw edge of a man who had not slept. "You sent that photo?" Daniel asked, tone flat. A pause. The sound of ice cubes hitting glass came through the line.
No.
"But I know who did. Corporate security. They think you're a disgruntled ex-employee trying to blackmail the board. They don't know what you really are." "And what am I?" Marcus exhaled. "The reason any of us still have jobs." The line went quiet. Daniel could hear the faint tick of that expensive watch in the background. 200,000 more, Marcus said finally. "Meet me at Pier 17 tomorrow night. But this time bring the girl's medical file. I want to see the stakes on paper before I burn every bridge I own." Daniel looked across the garage at Lily's sleeping form. The ribbon around her wrist had slipped again, a thin line of blue against pale skin. He folded the Polaroid once, the same way he had folded the rejection letter, and slid both into the same pocket. The pier smelled of salt and creosote at 10:49 p.m. Marcus arrived without the overcoat this time, sleeves rolled up, Patek hidden under a plain leather strap. He looked smaller under the dock lights. Daniel handed him the medical file, without a word. Marcus read the surgeon's notes, the odds, the cost of the experimental valve. When he reached the final page, his shoulders dropped. "I have a daughter too," he said, voice barely above the lap of water against pilings. "She's 9. Daniel said nothing. The blue ribbon was in his hand now, twisted between thumb and forefinger like a rosary. Marcus slid another envelope across the weathered bench between them. 311,000 this time. The bills were warm, as if freshly counted in a hurry. "This is everything I can pull without alerting the CFO.
Take it."
But the board is moving the auction up. They smell blood. 7 days from now, the entire patent portfolio goes on the block in open session. If your name surfaces there, they will destroy you and your daughter's future in the same motion." Daniel took the money. He did not thank him. Instead, he placed the blue ribbon on the bench between them, a small flag of truce. Marcus stared at it. "What is that?" "Something my wife tied in her hair the day she handed me the patent papers. She said it would remind me what mattered if the world ever tried to take it away." Marcus's fingers hovered over the ribbon, then withdrew. For the first time, the man in the expensive shoes looked genuinely sorry. "I was the one who signed the termination papers," he said quietly. "Human Resources called it restructuring. I called it Thursday. I had no idea whose work I was burying." Daniel stood. The pier creaked under his boots. 6 days until the auction, Mr. Hale. Tell your board the original inventor is coming home. And this time he's not asking permission. He left the ribbon where it lay. Let Marcus decide what to do with it." As Daniel walked back toward the truck, the first fat drops of rain began to fall, each one striking the wooden planks with a soft, deliberate sound. The debt was still being collected, hour by hour, one quiet reversal at a time. And the building that had once thrown him into the rain still had no idea the lights were about to come on for good. The rain chased him all the way to the truck, drumming on the windshield like impatient fingers. Daniel slid behind the wheel, the blue ribbon now back in his pocket, damp but intact. He did not look in the rearview mirror to see if Marcus was still sitting on the pier. Some debts you let the other man carry for a while. He spent the morning in the narrow garage behind his rented duplex on Elmhurst Street, tools laid out on a stained towel like instruments in an operating theater. The patent drawings he had reconstructed from memory were taped to the pegboard, edges curling from years in storage. One line at a time, he checked the math again. The alloy ratios, the thermal tolerances. Nothing had changed. The work was still perfect. At 10:17 a.m. his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He let it ring 3 times before answering. A woman's voice, crisp, corporate. "Mr. Reyes, this is Lena from Corporate Security at Helix Dynamics. We have reason to believe you've been in unauthorized contact with a member of our executive team. Care to comment?" Daniel stared at the half-disassembled prototype on the workbench. The smell of gun oil and solder hung thick in the air. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, voice flat. "We have time-stamped footage of Marcus Hale meeting an individual matching your description at Pier 17 last night. You were seen accepting an envelope. That constitutes potential industrial espionage under the non-disclosure you signed in 2012. The board has authorized me to offer you one final settlement. $200,000.
Cash.
Walk away today, and the file closes." Daniel's thumb traced the edge of the blue ribbon where it poked from his shirt pocket. "Tell the board I'll see them in 6 days," he said, and ended the call. The line went dead with a soft click that somehow sounded final. Mini Crisis Number 1 arrived at 2:34 p.m. when 2 unmarked sedans rolled up the narrow street and parked 3 houses down. Plain clothes. Badges on chains. Daniel watched them through the garage window while pretending to sweep. They were not here for noise complaints. He killed the lights, slipped out the back alley, and cut through 3 neighbors' yards carrying only a small black duffel and the prototype's core processor wrapped in foam. Heart hammering against his ribs, he made it to the river path before the first flashlight beam swept the garage door. 19 hours until they would change the locks on the evidence locker at the county courthouse. The one containing the original sealed patent application with his name still on it. He slept 4 hours in the cab of his truck parked behind an abandoned bottling plant off Route 9. The blue ribbon was now tied around the truck's rearview mirror, fluttering every time the wind rocked the vehicle. A reminder that moved with him. At dawn, he drove to a public library 2 towns over, logged in under a guest pass, and began the slow forensic work of rebuilding the paper trail they thought they had erased. Every keystroke felt like laying another brick in the wall that would eventually box them in. By 11 a.m., he had recovered 3 deleted emails from the cloud cache of a long-forgotten intern account. Each one referenced Project Obsidian and carried Marcus Hale's digital signature from 7 years earlier. The language was unmistakable. "Terminate Reyes immediately. Bury the origin files. We will refile under company ownership before Q4. Daniel printed them on the library's wheezing printer. The ink smelled like warm plastic and old lies. Small reversal at 3:12 p.m. He walked into the county records office wearing the same faded canvas jacket he used to wear on the factory floor. The clerk, a woman named Rosa, who had once gone to the same PDA meetings as his late wife, did not recognize him at first. Then her eyes dropped to the blue ribbon pinned inside his lapel like a campaign button from a war no one else remembered. "Daniel," she whispered. He slid the printouts across the counter along with the Freedom of Information request form he had filled out by hand. "I need these time-stamped and entered into the public docket before close of business. Can you do that for me, Rosa?" She looked at the papers, then at the 2 federal agents now pretending to read flyers on the opposite wall. Her hands trembled, but only slightly. "Give me 10 minutes, she said. "And keep that ribbon out of sight. Some people in this building still think you're the villain in this story." The stamp came down at 3:47 p.m. with a heavy, official thud. Public record now. Irreversible. The leak began in earnest that evening. A low-level patent examiner who owed favors from a gambling debt called Daniel at 7:22 p.m. from a burner phone. They're rushing the auction because the Chinese consortium just raised their bid to $48 million. But the examiner notes on your original filing were never fully purged. "I can get you the redacted PDF by midnight if you can meet me at the all-night diner on Highway 22. Booth in the back. Come alone." Daniel arrived at 11:58 p.m. carrying 2 coffees and the blue ribbon now folded into a tiny square inside his wallet. The examiner slid the thumb drive across the formica like it was radioactive. His eyes kept darting to the parking lot. "They're watching me," he muttered. "If this comes back on me, my wife loses the house." Daniel took the drive. The weight of it felt like justice taking its first real breath. "You won't lose the house," he said quietly. "Tell your wife the original inventor sends his regards." Tension ratcheted higher at 9:15 a.m. when Helix Dynamics filed an emergency injunction in federal court claiming Daniel was attempting to extort the company. The filing contained an affidavit signed by Marcus Hale himself, stating that any contact with the terminated former employee had been coercive in nature. The words burned behind Daniel's eyes when he read the scan on his phone outside the courthouse steps. He could almost hear the polished cadence of the man in the Brioni suit dictating them. He did not call Marcus. Instead, he drove to the old factory on the south side of town, the one they had shuttered right after firing him. The chain-link fence was rusted now, the gate padlocked with a heavy brass lock that looked newer than the rest of the decay. Daniel cut the lock with bolt cutters at 10:43 a.m. The snap echoed across the empty parking lot like a starter pistol. Inside, the main assembly floor was a cathedral of dust and silence. His boots left prints in the gray film that had settled over everything. He walked straight to Bay 7, the station that had once been his. The workbench was still there, scarred and familiar. He ran his fingers over the gouges he had made himself during the 287 nights he spent perfecting the alloy that now powered half the defense drones on the eastern seaboard. He left something on that bench before he walked out. The blue ribbon, laid out in a perfect circle. A calling card. By 2 p.m. the head of facilities had found it. Security footage went straight to the executive floor. Marcus Hale watched it alone in his corner office, the same office that used to belong to the man whose name was slowly crawling back into daylight. The ribbon looked impossibly bright against the industrial gray. Marcus did not call security. He simply stared at the screen for a long time, then reached into his desk drawer and took out the original ribbon Daniel had left on the pier. He placed the two side by side. They matched perfectly. The board called an emergency session at 4 p.m. Daniel learned about it from a paralegal who had once dated one of the junior engineers. 23 hours until the auction now. The Chinese bid had climbed to $52 million. The room smelled of fear and expensive coffee. Daniel spent the evening in a cheap motel on the edge of town, reassembling the working prototype from parts he had kept hidden for 7 years. Each click of a connector sounded like another minute ticking off the countdown. At 1:14 a.m. his daughter called from her grandmother's house. Her voice was small, frightened. "Daddy, there were men outside Grandma's window. They left when the neighbor's dog started barking." "What's happening?" He closed his eyes. The blue ribbon was on the nightstand beside the half-built device, glowing faintly under the cheap lamp. "Nothing you need to worry about, sweetheart. Go back to sleep. Daddy's fixing something that should have been fixed a long time ago." He stayed on the phone until her breathing evened out. Then he hung up, picked up the ribbon, and tied it around his left wrist like a tourniquet. 21 hours to the auction. The final mini-crisis came at sunrise. A process server shoved papers into his chest outside the motel vending machine. Helix had obtained a temporary restraining order barring him from any proximity to the auction venue. The penalty for violation, immediate arrest and seizure of any assets, including the trust fund set up for his daughter. Daniel read the document while the server stood there, shifting from foot to foot in his cheap suit. The signature at the bottom belonged to Marcus Hale. He folded the paper once, twice, 3 times. Then he looked the server dead in the eye. "Tell Mr. Hale I received it. And tell him the ribbon is back on my wrist. He'll know what that means." The server backed away, like Daniel was contagious. 18 hours left. Daniel drove to the storage unit he had paid for in cash every month for 7 years. Inside, beneath a tarp that smelled of mildew and motor oil, sat the original test rig he had built before they stole his future. He pulled the tarp back slowly. The metal gleamed as if it had been waiting for this exact morning. He worked without stopping until 3 p.m., recalibrating, stress testing, recording every result on a yellow legal pad with numbers that would make the Chinese consortium look like children playing with blocks. At 4:47 p.m., Marcus Hale's private number appeared on his burner phone. Daniel let it ring 6 times before he answered. The voice on the other end was no longer polished. It was raw. "I need to see you." In person. Before this goes any further. Daniel looked at the blue ribbon on his wrist, then at the fully functional prototype humming quietly on the workbench. Pier 17, he said. 1 hour. Come alone. And Marcus? Bring the termination papers you signed. I want to watch you burn them in front of me. He ended the call before the other man could reply. The rain had started again, soft and steady, the same deliberate sound it had made the night this latest chapter began. Daniel stepped out of the storage unit into the downpour, the prototype core in his coat pocket, the ribbon tight against his pulse. The building that had thrown him into the rain still had no idea how bright the lights were about to get. But it was learning, one quiet reversal at a time. The rain clung to his collar like a second skin as Daniel crossed the empty pier. Wind off the harbor carried the sharp tang of salt and diesel, the same smell that had filled the night air the evening they'd marched him out of the executive elevator 7 years earlier. He kept one hand in his pocket, fingers closed around the small plastic prototype core. The other wrist bore the faded blue ribbon, its edges frayed, but still bright against the gray of his sleeve. Marcus Hale arrived exactly on time, coat flapping, Italian shoes already ruined by the puddles. The Brioni suit looked slept in. No Patek flashed on his wrist tonight, only a cheap plastic watch. He carried a slim leather folder the color of dried blood. Daniel, Marcus said, voice cracking on the name. This has gone far enough. Daniel said nothing. He simply held out his hand. Marcus hesitated, then placed the folder in it. Inside were the original termination papers, the ones bearing Marcus's bold signature across the bottom line that had once cost Daniel everything. Daniel folded them once, twice, 3 times, the same slow ritual he had performed with the server's envelope hours earlier. He slipped the folded papers into his coat beside the prototype core. Marcus's eyes tracked the blue ribbon. You kept it. I never took it off after that first night. Not once. The 2 men stood in silence while the rain drummed on the pier's metal roof. Marcus looked smaller under the sodium lamps, the polished predator reduced to a man who couldn't meet another man's gaze. I didn't know what they'd do to you, Marcus said quietly. The board, the lawyers, the Chinese backers, they told me it was the only way to keep the patents alive. I believed them. Daniel's reply was flat. You signed the order that sent me to the street with 1 cardboard box and a 4-year-old daughter waiting in a shelter. Marcus flinched. I'm trying to fix it before tomorrow. Before the entire industry watches you destroy what we built. They drove separately to a nondescript warehouse on 14th Street that Daniel had rented under a name no one had used in 7 years. Inside, beneath another mildew-scented tarp, waited the second test rig, the one he had quietly perfected during night shifts at the machine shop where he had worked as night mechanic Dan. Marcus watched as Daniel connected the prototype core. The machine woke with a low, confident hum that filled the concrete space like a living thing. At 11:19 p.m. the first call came in on Marcus's phone. The head of the Chinese consortium. Marcus put it on speaker. Mr. Hale, our engineers say the stress numbers you send us are impossible. This is not the same technology we purchased from you. Marcus stared at the humming rig. Daniel stood 3 feet away, arms folded, blue ribbon visible against the dark fabric of his jacket. Tell them to run the numbers again, Daniel said, loud enough for the phone to catch every word. The line went silent for 6 full seconds. Then the voice returned, smaller. Who is that? Marcus swallowed. An old colleague. Daniel woke at 5:47 a.m. in the back of his truck, parked behind the warehouse, his daughter's old stuffed rabbit tucked against his chest like it had been every dawn since the termination. The rabbit's left ear was still stained with the coffee Marcus had thrown during their last shouting match in the boardroom. Daniel ran his thumb over that stain now, the same ritual he performed before every calibration. By 8 a.m. the bids on the auction lot had already climbed past $41 million. The consortium was panicking in private chat rooms Daniel had quietly infiltrated months earlier. He watched the messages scroll across his burner screen while he drank black coffee from a paper cup. Mini crisis number 2 arrived at 9:12 a.m. in the form of a process server who showed up at the warehouse door with an emergency injunction. The papers claimed Daniel's prototype infringed on patents now owned by Helix Dynamics. The signature at the bottom once again belonged to Marcus Hale. Daniel read it in front of the nervous young process server, folded the document once, twice, 3 times, and handed it back. "Tell Mr. Hale the ribbon is still on my wrist. And tell him the rabbit says hello." The server left faster than the one from the night before. Marcus arrived 23 minutes later, breathless, carrying a fresh set of documents that would withdraw the injunction. His eyes went straight to the blue ribbon, then to the faded stuffed rabbit, now sitting on the workbench, like a silent witness. "You brought that thing with you? Every single day, I rebuilt what you destroyed." Marcus's hands trembled as he signed the withdrawal in front of Daniel. The pen scratched loudly against the paper, the only sound except for the low hum of the third test rig Daniel had assembled during the small hours. 11 hours to the auction. The reversal that followed was small but perfect. Daniel connected the new rig to a remote diagnostic terminal. Within 90 seconds, the system overrode the backdoor locks the consortium had installed in every production unit sold over the last 6 years. Lights across 3 continents flickered green in perfect sequence. Marcus watched the live feed on Daniel's laptop, mouth slightly open. "That's every single unit we shipped. Every single one," Daniel confirmed. "They belong to me again at midnight tonight. Unless the auction goes through." Marcus looked at the rabbit, then at the ribbon, then at the man he had once ordered security to escort from the building. For the first time, the Polish CEO seemed to understand the depth of the debt coming due. By 2 p.m., the trade journals were leaking rumors. Mystery bidder emerges with working prototype that renders current Helix Dynamics line obsolete. Stock in the parent company dropped 4% in 12 minutes. Marcus's phone would not stop ringing. He silenced it and turned to Daniel. "I need to know how long you've been planning this." Daniel picked up the rabbit, brushed a speck of warehouse dust from its ear, and set it gently back beside the humming rig. 7 years, for months, 11 days. Since the exact minute you signed those papers and told me, quote, "Take your little box of junk and your little blue participation ribbon and get the hell out of my building." Marcus closed his eyes. The rain had started again outside, soft and steady, the same deliberate rhythm it had kept for every quiet reversal so far. A new crisis. A private investigator hired by the consortium had traced the storage unit. 2 men in dark coats were already cutting the lock when Daniel arrived. He watched from across the street as they pulled back the tarp on the original rig, the one that had gleamed like judgment the morning before. Daniel simply dialed a number. The warehouse alarms he had wired himself 7 years earlier began their piercing wail. The men dropped the tarp and ran. Daniel crossed the street, replaced the cut lock with one of his own, and patted the tarp once, the way a father might pat a child's shoulder. He added a new line to the yellow legal pad. Invoice number 4471 for the replacement lock, $18.47. The same amount he had been carrying in his wallet the day they fired him. Marcus met him at a diner on Industrial Boulevard at 7:19 a.m. The Brioni suit was gone, replaced by jeans and a plain gray sweater. No watch at all now. He ordered black coffee and stared at the blue ribbon still circling Daniel's wrist. "The consortium wants to meet you. Privately. Before the auction doors open at noon tomorrow." Daniel stirred his coffee once, the spoon clinking against cheap ceramic. "They can meet me on the auction floor. Same place they watched you throw me out." Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper. "I'm going to lose everything if this continues." "You already lost everything," Daniel said. "You just haven't admitted it yet." Yet the man across the table was changing, one cracked word at a time. The redemption was beginning to form in the small gestures, the way Marcus now carried his own coffee to the counter, the way his eyes kept returning to the rabbit Daniel had placed on the seat between them like a silent mediator. The next mini-crisis arrived at 10:03 a.m. when the auction house itself tried to cancel Daniel's bidder registration on technical grounds. A junior executive in a spotless navy suit arrived at the diner with fresh paperwork and a smug smile that died the moment he saw Marcus Hale sitting there without a tie. Daniel folded the cancellation notice once, twice, 3 times. He slid it across the table to Marcus. "Sign the override." In front of him, Marcus did. The junior executive's face went the color of old paper as he watched the man who had once run the industry countersign his own defeat. The small reversal that followed came at 11:47 a.m. Daniel activated the remote link from his truck. Every demonstration unit in the auction preview hall powered up at once, displaying performance numbers that made the room fall silent. Bids on the competing Helix lot froze, then began sliding backward in real time. Marcus watched the live feed on his own phone, shoulders slumped. The rabbit sat on the dashboard between them now, one stained ear tilted toward the man who had once tried to bury its owner. "I was wrong," Marcus said, so quietly the rain almost swallowed it. About all of it. Daniel let the admission sit between them for a long count of 10. "Tell that to the room tomorrow. When every person who laughed at my cardboard box watches me take back what's mine." The rain kept falling. The blue ribbon stayed tight against Daniel's pulse. And somewhere in the city the auction clock ticked down, each minute bringing the same core stakes back into sharper focus. A daughter's future, a stolen legacy, and one faded ribbon that had never stopped keeping score. The rain on the diner window blurred the city lights into streaks of neon as Daniel stared at the rabbit between them. Its one stained ear still tilted toward Marcus like an accusation that refused to fade. The man who had once worn $1,000 watches now traced a finger along the faded blue ribbon tied around the toy's neck, the same ribbon that had bound a tiny hospital wristband years earlier. Marcus Hale's private apology had been a beginning, not an ending. The redemption the industry once mocked was crawling forward in fragments, one reluctant signature, one quiet admission at a time. But the boardroom predators who had cheered Daniel's cardboard box exit still circled the upcoming auction like sharks scenting blood. And the core stakes had not changed. Lily's future hung on the final gavel. The legacy they had tried to erase still waited beneath layers of forged paperwork, and that same blue ribbon kept score. The next mini-crisis landed at 2:14 a.m. Daniel's burner phone buzzed against the motel nightstand. The auction house's cybersecurity team had flagged his remote access credentials as suspicious. A terse email demanded he appear in person at 7 a.m. with original proof of ownership or his entire bidder packet would be voided. The message carried the digital signature of the same compliance officer who had once notarized the forged transfer papers that stripped Daniel of his patents 3 years earlier. He sat up in the dark, the rabbit resting on the pillow beside him like a silent witness. The blue ribbon caught the red glow of the alarm clock. Daniel ran his thumb across the fabric worn soft by 1,000 nights of Lily clutching it during chemo. Marcus arrived at the motel parking lot at 6:41 a.m., eyes bloodshot, wearing the same rumpled Brioni suit from yesterday. Notie. The Patek was gone, pawned weeks earlier to cover the legal retainers Daniel had quietly arranged. "Technical glitch," Marcus muttered, reading the email over lukewarm gas station coffee. His voice still carried the ghost of boardroom command, but the tremor in it was new. "They're trying to freeze you out before the floor opens." Daniel said nothing. He simply handed Marcus the original patent folder, the one with the coffee stain from the night Lily was born, and watched the man's face tighten when he saw his own signature from years earlier, back when he had still been CEO and Daniel had been listed as consulting engineer. At 7:03 a.m. they walked into the auction house's compliance wing together. The same junior executive from the diner now stood behind a glass desk, flanked by 2 attorneys whose shoes clicked too loudly on the marble. The moment they registered Marcus Hale at Daniel's shoulder, the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Marcus spoke first. "Override the flag. These credentials are valid." The compliance officer smirked until Marcus slid the original patent folio across the glass. The man's eyes widened at the handwritten notations in Daniel's precise hand, the same notations that had powered every prototype the company still sold under the Helix brand. The smirk died when Marcus added his own countersignature in red ink, the pen trembling just enough to be visible. The small reversal arrived at 9:22 a.m. Daniel connected his laptop in the empty preview hall while the staff still prepared the lots. One quiet command sent a ghost signal through the demonstration units. Every screen that had been set to display the sanitized Helix corporate history suddenly refreshed with the unredacted logs. 287 test flights, Seat 18C on the red-eye from Seattle where Daniel had written the original code at 36,000 feet. Invoice number 4471 for the very first carbon fiber strut the firm still used. The numbers rolled across the monitors in cold green text while the overnight cleaning crew froze mid-mop. Marcus stood in the doorway, watching his own empire's secrets laid bare in front of minimum wage witnesses. The rabbit sat on the corner of the auction podium now, its blue ribbon stark against the polished walnut. One stained ear pointed directly at the largest monitor where Daniel's name appeared in the authorship field for the first time in years. "I never read the appendices," Marcus said, voice hoarse. "I let them bury you because it was easier than admitting you built everything worth owning." Daniel closed the laptop with a soft click. The monitors went dark again, but the cleaning crew had already seen. Word would travel before lunch. 12 hours remaining. They drove in silence back to the diner that had become their strange confessional. Marcus carried the rabbit inside himself this time, setting it on the booth between them like a fragile truce flag. The smell of burnt toast and cheap coffee wrapped around them while Daniel laid out the next set of documents. Transfer deeds dated the day before Lily's final round of treatment, the ones Marcus had signed while drunk on power and fear. The man across the table kept touching the blue ribbon, running his thumb over the same frayed edge Daniel had once used to tie off a ventilator tube when the hospital ran short on clamps. Each pass of that thumb seemed to peel away another layer of the old Marcus Hale. The spotless Italian shoes were scuffed now. The Brioni suit carried a faint stain of diner syrup. The once impeccable posture had begun to curve inward like a man learning the weight of what he had broken. But the industry still believed Daniel was finished. The same venture capitalists who had laughed at his cardboard box still planned to bid on the legacy they thought they owned outright. And the core stakes remained carved in every passing minute. Lily's college fund, the patents that should have carried Daniel's name, the blue ribbon that had traveled from a newborn's wrist to a dying girl's hand to this stained diner table. The next mini-crisis struck at 4:37 p.m. A process server in a cheap suit shoved through the diner door carrying a temporary restraining order obtained by 3 former Helix board members. The document claimed Daniel's remote demonstrations constituted corporate espionage and demanded the auction be postponed until an emergency hearing could be held, 4 days after the scheduled close. The server slapped the papers down beside the rabbit, the blue ribbon fluttering from the impact. Marcus stared at the names on the order. Men he had once called friends. Men who had toasted his decision to sideline the janitor with delusions of grandeur. His jaw worked silently for a long moment before he reached for the document. Daniel watched without speaking as Marcus Hale, the man who had once fired him in front of 30 witnesses, began to write his name again. This time the signature was steady, deliberate, and attached to a notarized affidavit that renounced any claim to the patents in question. The process server's smug expression fractured when Marcus dated the affidavit with today's numbers and slid it back across the table. The small reversal unfolded at 6:51 p.m. in the auction house's main gallery. Word of the morning's ghost signals had spread. A dozen early arriving bidders now lingered near the demonstration units, whispering. Daniel stood at the back of the room in his faded mechanic's jacket while Marcus, tie still missing, rabbit tucked under one arm like a disgraced executive clutching his last piece of evidence, approached the podium. He spoke only 7 words into the house microphone. Lot 73 belongs to Daniel Reyes. The gallery fell into a stunned hush.
Phones came out.
Someone recognized the rabbit. The same blue ribbon that had once been mocked as that janitor's security blanket now rested against the lapel of a Brioni suit that no longer looked expensive, only tired. Marcus met Daniel's eyes across the growing crowd. The apology in them was no longer private. It was beginning to go public, one reluctant witness at a time. 7 hours remaining. They returned to the truck as the city lights came on. The rabbit sat on the dashboard again, its stained ear turned toward Marcus Hale like it had been listening to every cracked word since the diner. Daniel could feel the weight of the blue ribbon against his own wrist where he had retied it that morning, a thin strip of fabric that had outlasted bankruptcy, illness, betrayal, and 4 long years of being erased. The core stakes had not shifted. They had only grown heavier with every passing hour. A daughter's future, a stolen legacy, and the quiet mechanical click of an auction clock counting down toward the moment when every person who had once laughed at a cardboard box would watch a single dad in a grease-stained jacket take it all back. Outside, the rain started again, tapping against the windshield like impatient fingers. Marcus reached over and adjusted the rabbit so both ears faced forward, toward whatever came next. The gesture was small. The redemption it signaled was still forming, one careful inch at a time. And the blue ribbon kept score. The rain kept falling as they drove east on 4th Street, windshield wipers slicing through the neon glare of pawn shops and all-night diners. Daniel kept both hands at 10 and 2, the way his flight instructor had taught him in 2009 before the first of 287 combat missions over Kandahar. The rabbit watched the road beside him, one ear still damp from Marcus's nervous grip. Marcus stared straight ahead, jaw tight. The Brioni jacket now rumpled and open at the collar. "You could have told me," he said at last, voice barely louder than the rain. "Back at the firm. Any of it." Daniel didn't look over. Would it have mattered? Marcus swallowed. The answer sat between them like unpaid interest. They pulled into the service alley behind the auction house at 1:47 a.m. The side door was unlocked exactly as Daniel had arranged 6 weeks earlier with a night security guard who still owed him for rebuilding a transmission on credit. Inside, the cavernous warehouse smelled of lemon polish and old paper. Lot 73 waited under a gray canvas tarp on a raised platform at the center of the main hall, spotlit by a single halogen that buzzed like angry hornets. Daniel climbed the 3 steps alone. He pulled the tarp back in one slow motion. Beneath it sat the original control console from the Sentinel-9 satellite array, the one the Defense Department had declared obsolete in 2018, the one Marcus's venture capital group had bought for scrap at $41,000 and then buried in patent litigation for 4 straight years. The same console Daniel had designed in a basement lab while his wife was dying of ovarian cancer and their 3-year-old daughter slept in a laundry basket beside the workbench. The blue ribbon was still tied to the left joystick, faded but intact. Marcus stood at the bottom of the steps, rabbit now tucked inside his coat like contraband. "I thought it was junk," he whispered. "We all did." Daniel ran a finger along a hairline crack in the casing he had sealed himself with epoxy in 2014. "You thought a single dad pushing a mop at night couldn't possibly be the lead systems architect on a black-budget project worth $2.4 billion.
So you fired me.
Took the patents. Laughed when I showed up with a cardboard box." A soft click echoed from the rafters. The house audio system came alive. Daniel had patched it earlier that afternoon using nothing but a soldering iron and a recalled flight helmet. Static, then a calm, recorded voice, his own, from a 2016 briefing, filled the empty auction hall. Sentinel-9 is not scrap. It is the only array capable of real-time atmospheric correction for low-orbit assets. Without it, every GPS bird in the constellation drifts by 47 meters within 90 days. Marcus flinched as if struck. Daniel kept working. He flipped 4 hidden switches in sequence. The console lit up with a soft amber glow that hadn't been seen since the patents were seized. Numbers began scrolling across the small display. Coordinates, signal strength, live telemetry from 6 satellites still quietly obeying firmware Daniel had written before anyone at Helix Dynamics had ever heard his name. At 4:12 a.m., the first phone call came, then another. By 5:30, the gallery began to fill with the same early bidders who had watched Marcus hand over the rabbit the night before. Word had traveled through the narrow world of high-stakes patent reclamation. Venture partners in tailored overcoats. Former board members clutching $9 cups of coffee. 2 junior associates who had once helped box up Daniel's desk while snickering about the janitor's midlife crisis. They all took seats in the semicircle of folding chairs that had been arranged overnight. No one spoke above a murmur. The blue ribbon on the joystick caught the light like a quiet accusation. At precisely 6:59 a.m., the main doors opened. The full auction crowd, 187 registered bidders, analysts, reporters, and the original investors who had voted to terminate Daniel Reyes 4 years earlier, filed in. They expected a routine liquidation of distressed tech assets. What they found was a single dad in a grease-stained jacket standing behind the resurrected heart of a system worth more than all their portfolios combined. Marcus Hale walked to the podium at 7:03. His hands shook so badly the gavel rattled against the wood. The rabbit's ear protruded from his inner pocket, blue ribbon trailing like a vein. He didn't bang the gavel. He simply looked out across the sea of familiar faces, the same ones who had toasted his brilliance at the rooftop launch party in 2020, and spoke the sentence he had rehearsed in the truck. Lot 73 is hereby withdrawn from sale. Title and all associated patents revert immediately to their rightful owner, Daniel Reyes. A ripple moved through the room. Cameras flashed. Someone dropped a briefcase. Marcus turned to Daniel, eyes wet. The private apology had already happened in the cab between 2:14 and 3:07 a.m., hours of halting admissions that tasted like rust. This part was public. I was arrogant. I was blind. I humiliated a man who had already lost more than any of us will ever understand. I stole 4 years of his daughter's childhood. For that, I am sorry. Truly. The words landed like spent shell casings. No one clapped. The silence itself was the verdict. Daniel stepped forward. He reached out, untied the blue ribbon from the joystick with careful fingers, and slid it back around his own wrist exactly where it had been the morning they fired him. Then he looked at the crowd, at the polished Italian shoes now scuffed from standing too long, at the Patek watches catching the overhead lights, and spoke for the first time since the hearing began. My daughter starts kindergarten in September. She's never seen her father's name on anything except a termination notice. Today that changes. He pressed one final switch. The console chimed, a clear, bell-like tone that echoed through the hall. On the massive projection screen behind him, live satellite telemetry appeared, 6 birds snapping back into perfect formation, correcting years of accumulated drift in real time. The Department of Defense seal flickered in the corner, followed by a single line of text, acknowledgement of original authorship, Daniel J. Reyes, lead engineer, 41 classified missions. The room exhaled. Marcus met him at the base of the steps. He held out the stuffed rabbit like a man returning stolen property. Daniel took it, tucked it gently under one arm, and for the first time in 4 years allowed himself to smile. Small, tired, real. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight cut through the tall warehouse windows and landed on the blue ribbon, making the faded fabric glow like something newly blessed. 3 months later, the Sentinel 9 array was back under government contract at $178,000 per corrected orbit. Daniel's name appeared in the patent reissue on page 1. He bought a small house on Maple Terrace with a backyard swing set. The rabbit sits on the windowsill of his daughter's bedroom now, both ears forward, blue ribbon freshly washed and tied in a careful bow. Marcus Hale left Helix Dynamics 3 weeks after the auction. He now runs a modest patent ethics consultancy out of a converted garage in the same industrial park where Daniel once pushed a mop. They speak once a month. The conversations are never long. They don't need to be. Some debts are paid in public view under bright lights and clicking cameras. Others are paid quietly, over coffee at 7:15 a.m., when two men who once destroyed each other sit across a diner table and simply pass the sugar, without a word. The blue ribbons still keep score. And every night, when Daniel lifts his sleeping daughter into bed and kisses her forehead, he remembers the cardboard box they once laughed him out the door with. He remembers the exact quote. Scrap metal. No value. Then he looks at the rabbit on the sill, at the clean blue ribbon that outlasted every insult, every courtroom lie, every polished dismissal, and he knows the truth that the auction room finally witnessed under those buzzing halogens. Value is not decided by the man in the Brioni suit. It is decided by the man who built the machine in the first place while the world was busy looking the other way. That is what the blue ribbon always knew. And now, so does everyone else.